The humanly impossible 116-day fasting of Bhagat Singh and his friends, their martyrdom for the nation, the unyielding actions of the revolutionaries and their uncompromising patriotism fostered the national consciousness of the people. It helped create a favorable atmosphere for the growth of revolutionary mentality among the next generation of nation lovers. Despite the death of most of the members of Chandrasekhar Azad's HSRA and Surya Sen's IRA, the revolutionary movements took a brief gap but did not die down. The Gandhian Satyagraha on one hand and revolutionary struggle on the other swayed the independence movement and now entered Subhash Chandra Bose. Bose studied in England and came back to write the Indian Civil Services exam to serve India. He became the Congress president as well. Bose believed strongly that any means to overthrow the British yoke was acceptable, but Gandhi was uncompromising on non-violent means. Bose worked with Chitraranjan Das and other revolutionary thinkers of Bengal and was also jailed many times in inhuman conditions. The world was heading towards World War II in the end of the 1930s. Japan, Germany and Italy were pitched against England, France and Russia. The British had to focus in fighting the World War II. That would mean they would have lesser resources to rule India. Bose saw this as an opportunity to intensify India's freedom struggle. Gandhi and Nehru weren't in agreement with Bose, so he resigned. With the guidance of Savarkar, Bose stepped out of the country to prepare for a military campaign, raising an army of Indian soldiers from across the world to fight the British and throw them out of the country. The British saw Bose as a dangerous threat and arrested him. Yet, he planned his escape to Germany. Bose embarked on an epic journey to Germany on 16 January 1941. He reached Kabul first, then took a car across Hindu Kush mountains, and then took a train from Moscow to reach Berlin. He toured Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Germany, and Italy to gain their support. He freed over 3,000 Indian prisoners of war who had previously fought on behalf of the British in North Africa. Bose then navigated towards Japan in 1943. This time, Bose's vehicle was not a motor car, not an aeroplane, and not the frontier mail. Instead, it was a submarine. They spent 2 long months in the dark space, breathing the air filled with diesel smell. Imagine Netaji's drive for achieving the greater goal. With a lot of hardship, he finally reached Singapore and then Japan. After the defeat of the British at Singapore, the Japanese army captured about 40,000 Indian soldiers as prisoners of war. With these prisoners of war, led by the Commander-in-Chief, Mohan Singh, Raj Bihari Bose formally established the Indian National Army, also called Azad Hind Fauj, on 1st September 1942. The INA members underwent intensive physical training. As a part of intellectual and mental training, they attended lectures on national history with special reference to the condition of India under British rule. The trainees adopted the 3 main principles: unity, faith, and sacrifice. In July 1943, Subhash Chandra Bose took over the INA. His words, "Give me blood, I will give you freedom," infused fresh vigor and patriotic fervor in the Indian community living in Southeast Asia. They supported the INA financially and called Bose as Netaji.
He was one person who inspired people to take up to arms and form. And he said we should talk with British as equals, and decided one of the ways to do is we need an army. The INA was formed. In the INA, single-handedly Bose has to raise the whole army. Funds which is needed. Imagine military budget raised by an individual. Military budget is generally raised by the country. Here, an individual went, asked people to support, and how much faith people must have had in Bose to come forward to support him with a military budget. Imagine an army of 80,000 people. You need to feed them 3 times a day, provide them with ammunition, training, war skills, uniform for army, and every other thing which requires for a battalion to move. All this was done by a single man raising a military budget. Since he had a good ally with Russia and Germany, etc., they accepted to send the Indian prisoners back to him. So he got back trained Indian soldiers now ready for his army. This is another way. Apart from new recruits, he could bring back prisoners of war of Indian origin to Indian National Army. And he had a very clear vision. He ran a government called Government in Exile, Indian Government in Exile. From Singapore he was operating and saying, when we form, this is our government. So the government had already a prime minister, the president, things like that. Government in exile. Imagine how irritated the British would be when one man is sitting outside and saying, let's have government in exile.
Netaji called for women to participate in the fight for India's freedom. He included an all-women infantry combat unit in the INA, which was the first of its kind in the world. Saraswati Rajamani is worked in the military intelligence wing of the INA. She was the youngest spy. Captain Lakshmi Sehgal captained the Rani Lakshmi regiment of the INA. Do you know where the first Indian flag raise happened? Andaman and Nicobar Islands were handed over to Azad Hind government. Netaji named the islands as Shahid and Swaraj and hoisted the tricolour flag of Indian independence on 30th December 1943 in Gymkhana grounds, Port Blair. When Netaji gave the call, Chalo Delhi, the INA plunged into direct military operation. They marched through the dense forests of Rangoon towards India. Braving the aerial bombing, they defeated the British army here. The INA reached Moirang, Manipur and hoisted the tricolour Indian flag, singing the Azad Hind Force national anthem on 14 April 1944. What happened after is disheartening. Incessant rain washed away roads, cutting off supply of ration, medicines and transportation and communication. There was widespread pandemic like malaria and flu. The British also reinforced with larger contingents of army men. Thus, with every passing day, the INA started losing ground and had to retreat out of Burma for safety. Out of 43,000 INA recruits, about 16,000 fell into the hands of British forces. They were placed in detention camp and mercilessly killed, infamously remembered as the Red Fort trials. INA soldiers were declared as enemies of the country instead of being called patriots. The public of India started protesting through mass rallies. This forced the British government to set free 11,000 prisoners. The stir created in the country reflected in the naval barracks too. In 1946, sailors of Indian origin of the Royal Indian Navy started a strike at Bombay, condemning poor living conditions and food. The strike spread from Bombay to Karachi in the west, Madras in the south, and Visakhapatnam and Calcutta in the east. The revolting sailors of about 20,000 men took possession of 78 ships and shore establishment. This shook the British. They sought the help of the Congress leaders to quell the rebellion. The British government decided to leave India in 1947 after the massive Indian naval revolt of 1946, which raised the fear of another large-scale war along the lines of the Great War of 1857. The British intelligence summary issued on 25 March 1946 admitted that the Indian Army, Navy and Air Force units were no longer trustworthy. Clement Attlee, the British Prime Minister, decided to end the British rule in India and order the transfer of power. When he visited India in 1955, he was interviewed by the Chief Justice of the Calcutta High Court, Justice P.B. Chakravarti. He was asked as to why the British departed in 1947 in such haste. In his reply, Attlee cited three major reasons. Erosion of loyalty to the British Crown among the Indian Army and naval personnel as a result of the military activities of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's army was the first one. Fear of safety of the British officers working in India was the second. British had already looted about 45 trillion US dollars from India. To maintain India further would mean investing back in this country.
He was a wonderful freedom fighter, a greatest revolutionary our nation has seen, who always had the spirit of detachment with which he worked. And whenever he has to take some difficult decisions, Bose would withdraw himself, take a small book, the Bhagavad Gita, read a few verses, and then calm himself down and then take a decision. So the spiritual character of Bose is very important. The combination of spirit and playing with matter, Bose is an outstanding example.
Salutations to the ever-inspiring visionary Subhash Chandra Bose and his valorous INA, who played a huge role in thwarting the British and gaining India her independence. Jai Hind.